Hello and welcome to Authors on Tap. My name is Javier Ramirez, and along with Kristen Gilbert and a crew of dedicated and lovely volunteers, run Exile and Bookville here in the Fine Arts Building in downtown Chicago. Today, we're actually not in the bookstore. We are 2 floors above Suite 410, which affords these, you guys are watching the gesture, these gorgeous views of Lake Michigan, Grant Park, the Buckingham Fountain, and really a slice of the Chicago skyline. So it's sort of fitting that we're having these amazing views with this amazing event today with Emma Straub. Emma, on top of being a very talented writer, is also a fellow bookseller. If you don't know, Emma co-owns Books Are Magic in Brooklyn. And I met Emma about 3 or 4 years ago at a conference. Her general manager, Nick Wazansky, is my hetero life mate. He said, "We have to be." So I knew we were, but I was really nervous. And I walked over, I saw you, you were with your crew, and they were so happy to have you. And I knew 2 seconds in why we were still there. You were very inviting, you were very charming, you were very welcoming, and I felt like after 8 seconds, like you were friends. And so when this tour came up, I was so happy to send the word in for your Indie Next. It was an Indie Next pick, which is a huge deal in the world. And I was so happy to be the blurb that
you were number one. You were the most supportive.
I feel like I'm getting giddy right now. Just talking about it, but I'm just so happy to have you today. And you were going to be in conversation with Jessamine Chan. She's going to be discussing the book with Emma. And if you don't know this book, this is, I've had like 12 conversations with people over the last 2 weeks about this book, The School for Good Mothers. Most recently with Lindsay Hunter, who we had a conversation with Dan Jean last night. She went on for like 5 minutes about how incredibly wonderful you are. And we're so lucky that you had time to do this. I mean, you were really excited about to do this. I think you might have broken some plans to make it happen. But we're going to get started here. Enjoy your drinks, enjoy the conversation, and please help me in welcoming Emma and Jen.
Yeah.
Welcome to Chicago. The funny thing is, Emma and I have only met in person once before during a television taping.
Yeah.
But as I was very pleased to see in your newsletter, if we've been on TV together, then we're sisters.
Yeah, I think so.
The other funny story I have for you is while reading this book and like reading that it was an autobiographical time travel novel, the funny thing is I have been to your childhood house. And the reason is because I used to work at Publishers Weekly, and I feel like your dad is friends with Bradford Morrow.
Sure is.
He hosted a party for conjunctions. So I went to a very lovely party at your beautiful
amazing
parents'
What
house.
year was that?
A very long time ago. Like 2011, when they still lived there.
Yeah.
So,
Right.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
So,
thanks for coming over.
It was a lovely time, but I was very excited when Javier asked me to do this event. Also pretty intimidating because you're one of the most charismatic people I've ever met. So when I was watching during we did this Read with Jenna taping together in March, and I was watching you and Mateo take over the Read with Jenna Instagram Live, and like someone needs to give them a show or a podcast, and you make it look so easy. So this book really was a source of joy this week during a very heavy week. And I'm here to testify that it does actually make you feel better in a time of like nothing makes you feel better. So the book was really a source of pleasure and relaxation and like hope in a time when I was like in a very bad state. So it was also getting to live the 90s teenage experience that I didn't have. So I'm from Chicago originally. I grew up in Oak Park. I went to St. Ignatius, and I can tell you that my teenage years were nothing like this. And I think because I went to a high school where like everyone was coming from all over the city, like there was no hanging out together at night. And I can also tell you that if I'd done most of the things in this book, I would have been kicked out of the Chan family instantly. So in 1996, all I wanted was to be a teenager in Manhattan, and so I got to live that in this book and really enjoyed it. But first, I wanted to say congratulations on the New York Times list and all the lists.
Thank you.
And also just want to see how you're doing, because this is not the easiest week to be a book tour.
Yeah, I mean, I'm okay. I'm okay. You know, I think that I mean, this week has been wild. I mean, I've been, so what day is it? Today's Friday?
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. I think this is my 11th of 10, it's either my 10th or 11th event.
Since last Tuesday?
Yeah, because I had two double headers. So where I did 2 in one day. So I think that's true. It might be, if it's not true, it's close to true. But yeah, I mean, it was really sort of busy and hectic, and then like, I mean, just what happened this week was just so horrible that I was like, how do I do this? How do I keep doing this? But then what I discovered is, it was always true, of course, which is that like, we all need distractions from horrible things, and that when I went that day, I was in LA and I saw the news on my phone literally in between 2 events. I was like, how is anyone gonna be there? How am I supposed to be my like chatty, chipper self? But then I was, and like, we all needed it, and it felt so good for, 45 minutes or whatever. And then, so yeah, I mean, it's actually, I would say like being on tour and like the traveling and the events actually sort of has made it easier. But yeah, it's wild. I mean, it's like being on a book tour, period. It's a crazy experience. I told my publisher that I really wanted them to like do it to me, because I was so sad, because my last book came out in April of 2020, so I wasn't doing much then. And they were like, okay, Emma. And so they like really are like grinding me.
Is this just the beginning of a longer tour, or are you headed home?
This is the end of the biggest part of it, but then yeah, I think I have like 8 more. But yeah, but I'm so happy. I'm so happy to like be able to have conversations with people I love, and to see people, and to talk to readers, and to go to bookstores. I mean, that's the best. And then I get to eat special food.
One thing we talked about in March was the joy of being alone in a hotel room.
Oh, yeah.
As you were telling me, it's worth it. It's worth it for the long time.
Yeah, it is.
So I know a lot of people here might have already read the book, but for people viewing online, and for anyone who hasn't read the book yet, could you tell us what the book is about?
Yes. Okay. So This Time Tomorrow is my autobiographical time travel novel. It's about a woman named Alice who is on the cusp of 40, and her life is fine. It's not terrible, but it's not great. And her beloved science fiction writer father is very, very sick. And she goes out for her 40th birthday, and she drinks too much, and she passes out. And then when she wakes up, it's the morning of her 16th birthday, and she's in her childhood bedroom in 1996.
And it's wonderful and really, really fun to read. I really felt like I was in the hands of a pro. And also I had a note to myself, like, 6th book, how? Question mark. So I read that you wrote this during a lockdown, a much more productive lockdown than many of us have had. Can you tell us about the journey to the book?
Yeah, sure. So in March of 2020, I was like 50 or 60 pages into a novel. And, then just like everybody else, that had to stop very abruptly. because, you know, my children were home and I had no childcare, and my husband was at the bookstore shipping out books. And so that book, you know, exists in amber at that moment. And I didn't have childcare again until late September. And so it was only then that I could even like start to contemplate writing again. And what I knew for sure was that I couldn't just go back to the book that I had been writing. It just felt, I don't know, like some weird vestigial part of the body. Like it felt bad and wrong. I might go back to it someday. Like it's not, I was having a wonderful time writing that book, but I couldn't go back to it. And my dad had been in the hospital at that point for a month and a half. And he and I had been having a lot of conversations about writing and the family and ourselves and Jeopardy and Donald Trump, you know, like whatever. And I had this idea, and I mean, I sort of ran it by him, or maybe it was even his idea. He does not remember it being his idea, but I sort of think it was. But in any case, it was like, it came out of a conversation that we were having. And it was a joke. Like, it was a joke. Like, I should write this book about this woman who's visiting her father in the hospital, and he's a writer. But then the more I thought about it, the more I was like, no, I could really do that. I could really do that. And the time travel part of it just seemed like so much fun. It seemed like so much fun. And I called one of my dad's best friends, Gary Wolf, who's an expert in many things. And I was like, Gary, can I write a time travel book? Like, am I gonna get in trouble? Is there like some sort of like, get in trouble with? Well, I don't know, some sort of an organization.
I was just wondering, because so like my book is a sci-fi element, but like it would totally fail by all the sci-fi stuff. And so I was wondering, like, do people get mad if you like dip into genre stuff?
Well, so there's a section of the book that I honestly have totally forgotten that I had written, because it's like, it's so verbatim what I believe about what my dad thinks. And therefore I sort of inherited, which is that, like, I mean, I'll just paraphrase, is that real genre writers can't stand it. Gary, you tell me if you think I'm putting words in people's mouths. But like, I would say people can't stand it when, you know, some literary writer, you know, comes along and is like, oh my God, what if I use this? And look at me, it's so groundbreaking, you know? And then they get praised, and maybe they even get prizes and whatever. Whereas the people who like live and breathe and read genre are like, who's this? You know, who's this schmuck? So I didn't want to be that schmuck.
Did you have time travel imposter syndrome?
Well, no, I mean, Gary was very reassuring, and I'm just blaming it all on you, Gary. It's literally not even just because you're here. This is everywhere I go. People ask me this question. But what I found reassuring is that was the idea of that time travel has transcended the walls of science fiction. Certainly, like when people refer to my book as science fiction, I'm like, you are gonna be really disappointed, because it's like just people sitting at kitchen tables and eating hot dogs. Like it's really not science fiction. But you know, then I started, like, I mean, I read a lot of time travel books, and I watched a lot of time travel movies and television shows, and I really just sort of tried to absorb as many different time travel narratives as I could. And what I found is what we all know to be true, that you know, like, you can't call 13 going on 30 science fiction, right? And you can't, like, I don't know, I mean, what do you call Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure? Like, so I was like, okay, I can do it. And you know, and it was so reassuring also to read, like, time and again, or Kindred, which I love, which I'd never read before, and see how well writers wrote time travel using memes that contained absolutely no science whatsoever.
I really like those kind of sites.
Yeah, because, like, that's not me, you know, like, I knew I could do it as long as I could do it sort of my way. And once I realized that, like, that truly was well within the scope, I felt more confident. And then once I was writing it, I had such a good time. I had such a good time writing it, even though I was crying a lot. I also really had a good time.
One thing that I'd love to hear more about was, you mentioned on NPR that you were part of a group of writer mom friends who were all working on time travel novels.
Yes.
During the pandemic.
Yeah, and I didn't know it at the time. You know, it's like we were all, like, in our own little warrens. But my friend Natal Gabrian has a time travel novel called The Late Shift, that it's Last Shift or Late Shift. It's Late Shift. It comes out in July, which is sort of about, like, kind of like wormholes through New York City that are especially used by people who work in the hospitality industry. It's like, you've got two jobs, how do you get from one job to the other really fast as you sort of go through this secret passageway kind of thing. Emily Mandel's new book has time travel. And then there are a few that haven't come out. My friend Eden Lepucky is writing a time travel. Like, there are.
Did you swap drafts? Or
No, we were all, I mean, maybe I learned Natalka's book and I read Emily's, but no, I think that we were all doing what I was doing, which was like, how do I get out of here?
So you were building an escape hatch through the books.
Yes. My children are very beautiful. They are very smart. I love them so much, and they are so loud. And you know, after really being just alone with them for, I mean, I would say that mine was probably at the store about 12 hours a day, like, total. I needed a place to go.
So how did you decide that the place to go would be partly 1996? Like, why that year?
So I knew I wanted it to be high school. I love teenagers. I love teenagers. Every time I start a book, I'm like, there are no teenagers in this one.
So
and they are always
heading toward a book with teenagers, you think?
Yeah, yes. Every single book. I have yet to write a book that doesn't have a teenager in it. I don't know what's wrong with me. But so I mean, I knew that's my happy place. But I wanted Alice to be 16 because part of the fun of this book was not only you know, like, going back to my teenage years and, like, remembering, like, oh, what was on Broadway and 86th Street in that year? Like, had that restaurant closed yet? Like, was that there, you know, like sort of rebuilding my childhood neighborhood. But it was also, I decided to give myself permission to like pour in all of the cultural references. Because I think that people don't do that because it dates something so
But here
like,
the dating was intentional.
right, yeah. And I mean, it was because like I was like, that's the point, right? That the point is that she's like, oh God, now I'm in 1996. So I wasn't afraid to let her be surrounded by and thinking about all of these cultural things. And one of the cultural sort of touchstones of my preteen life was thinking about turning 16 because of Molly Ringwald. Because I love Molly Ringwald so much and I love 16 Candles. And I was like, oh, well, she should be 16.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
No, I think I was on the river turning 18. So did you watch Yellow Jackets?
Oh, yes.
So Yellow Jackets was kind of terrifying because like I was also graduating high school.
Yeah.
And like, wow, tripped down memory lane in the bloodiest way possible.
Yeah.
One thing I was wondering, so I was looking at the table of your books, and this is not even all of your books. So when you're at this point in your career, you have this huge following. Does that affect you at all? With like people expecting a certain kind of book from you? Like, do you have to really tune that out to be what you want as a writer? Like, like is that everyone expecting like another version of the
Yeah. Well, you know, I think that's part of the reason why I was so content to move on from the book that I had been writing in the spring of 2020, because it was, you know, it did have things in common with my last 2 books, certainly. I guess my last 3 books previous to this one, but you know, it was like a big ensemble cast and sort of get in everybody's head and that sort of thing. And I do think that the like extreme isolation of 2020 really did let me let go of that sort of expectations. Like, who cares? Who cares what I write? Like, yeah, I have to call my editor up and tell her I'm writing a time travel novel instead of the one that she paid me for. But what's she gonna do? You know? She was very supportive. Just camera. She was very supportive. But I don't know. I mean, I don't know if you feel this way, but I certainly feel like if I have, you know, learned anything from the last couple of years, it's that we don't know what is coming, and why not just try something? Like, I feel like slightly unshackled from my own feelings about like what I'm supposed to do and what I'm supposed to write.
Yes, I will let you know in a couple of years. I don't have any answers just yet. Related to this, because I think of you as someone who's really good at being a public person. I don't know how you feel about it, but you present as someone who's like very at ease with the public facing office. How do you balance, like, I think I saw someone refer to as a lowercase w writer, with being a capital A author. And now you're also a capital B bookseller.
Yeah.
So how do you juggle the public-private nature of your life?
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, it's hard. It's hard for sure. I think, you know, for me, I mean, I guess I grew up, you know, we haven't talked about Big Heat very much, but like, you know, I grew up in a household where like I knew that people knew who my dad was because he was a writer, and where, you know, often in restaurants, he would like sign the check and people would be like, are you the Peter Straub, which is like this favorite thing in the world when that happens. And so I knew, like I was always aware of that as a thing that sometimes happened to writers, but certainly not to all writers. And so I guess when I started to, I mean, my first two books certainly didn't sell any number of copies. I mean, they sold copies to all my friends, which was very nice. And sometimes my friends even pretend that they like my first novel the most. And I'm like, listen, just because you're the only person who read it, you don't have to say that. It's fine.
I wrote you a fan note on Goodreads for Laura. This was like so many years ago, and I think I was, I think I was, so I had it, had an early copy, and I really enjoyed it, and you actually wrote back.
Well, good, I'm glad.
It was very But so you grew up with,
so I grew up
a famous author in the house.
Yeah, I mean, I guess so I saw it and I didn't think that part of it was strange. You know, that part of it seemed sort of normal to me. But then obviously what happened, you know, in between the time, like when my dad was like, you know, selling millions of copies of books, and me selling definitely not millions of copies of books, because nobody sells millions of copies of books anymore, was the internet.
Right.
And I, thank you, Javier. I took to the internet like a little baby duckling to water. And I loved it, you know, like I loved Twitter and those things, and have always really enjoyed that as involved. And I think that, like, I mean, I've always used those tools really like for my own pleasure. And the fact that I was like sort of promoting my work or sharing my work, it really was not the point to me. And I think that I still think that like that is what makes any user of a social media site actually successful at it, because God knows, like, if you're a novelist and you've never touched those things before, and then like 1 month before your book comes out, your editor or publicist is like, I think you should be on social media, and you're like, oh, you know, it doesn't work.
I had a version of that.
Right, and I think that a lot of writers are really allergic to that stuff, which seems much healthier, and I am envious of it. But I always liked it. But I do feel like I'm now at this funny place where, like, I don't know if this is a weird thing to say. I'm still working it out, but I feel like I've gotten to a place now where, like, I feel like it's not for me anymore. Like, I don't know, like my natural response is to respond to everything. And now I feel like, no, Emma, no, let people talk about whatever it is they want to say about me, whether it's good or bad or whatever. And like, that conversation is not for me. Like for example, Goodreads. I haven't been on Goodreads in, I don't know, 5 years or something, because I feel like that is not a space for me anymore. It's just a space for readers. It is not a space for writers. And like, I mean, God knows I don't go to the bad place on the internet, you know, that place, like, because that too is not a space for writers. That's a space for readers. That was a very, very long-winded answer.
No, it was great. No, I don't go to either of those places because everyone told me it would be bad for my mental health.
Yes.
To scroll down.
Yes.
But like, I'm grateful that people take the time to write reviews. But
Yeah.
I'm told to not.
Yes. No. Don't.
So you also don't.
No.
Can we just talk more about your dad?
Yeah.
Which I'm so curious to hear about. So this book really made me want to call my parents and be nicer to them, which is, I wish I could do like consistently. But I mean, also, I mean, I'm always thinking like I should ask my parents these questions about like, and also they've had this very traumatic life that we don't talk about.
Yeah.
It's traumatic.
Yeah.
But it's really difficult to, instead of being like, oh, here's the Sunday paper and let's have breakfast, to actually sit and ask, like, tell me about your childhood and tell me about these pivotal points in your life.
Yeah.
Do you think writing this book and sharing this with your parents, which is, I can't imagine a gift like this book for one's dad, like how proud he must be and how pleased. Do you think it has made those conversations easier in your life, or are these things just hard to talk about?
I mean, I think. Oh, I mean, it is. Yes, I think these things are hard to talk about, and you know, there are still like so many things that I know that I should talk to my parents about and record. I mean, you know, my dad, I mean, mostly my mother really, because she actually remembers things. And my dad is like really good at telling you about this like asshole in the second grade class or something. Like his stories are like very specific, but always sort of niche, you know, like, but yeah, I mean, what I did record some conversations with my dad when he was in the hospital, and it was great. And the only reason that I thought to do that was because one friend of mine whose father died recently told me to, and she said, just record it because you'll want it later, no matter what he says, like you'll just want it. So I did that. But yeah, I mean, it's, you know, it's really been incredible because, you know, what happens in the book is that Alice and her dad really end up mostly like talking about nothing, you know, like mostly they just like are hanging out together, which is mostly what I do with my dad too. But it's been amazing to like watch my dad watch the publication of this book. Like when my first book came out, he was salty about the whole thing.
Really?
But yeah, well, because he was like, why does Vogue magazine want to talk to you, not me? And I'm like, because I'm like a 30-year-old blonde girl and you're 65? Like, what are you talking about? Why is nylon taking your picture? I'm like, because I'm a youth. Barely. I was barely a youth. Yeah, no, he was very jealous. He like didn't know how to handle it.
I would never have guessed that.
Yeah, he was. But it's gotten progressively easier and easier. And now that is gone. That is gone. And this is like, you know, I mean, imagine like one of your children going on like a book tour around the country, like talking about how much they love you. You know, that's pretty good.
That's pretty. Is he also there raising his hand? Like, by the way, guys, I made it. I'm fine.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. See it. No, I always have to preface it by saying that he's alive. Yeah, and I mean, and I when I started writing the book, I didn't think he would be. You know, I certainly didn't. I didn't think he would be, and I didn't think. I mean, I didn't know that he would come home from the hospital, and so we're all glad he did. And you know, I mean, I obviously I would have written the book anyway. It would have been a different experience. But yeah, I mean, being able to give it to him at the end was pretty good. The first thing he said was, "What page do I die on?" Toward the end.
I don't know if I'm going to ask about your family life and your kids, but you are the second generation of notable authors in your household. What do your kids understand about what you do?
You know, so because my husband and I also have a bookstore, which is this concrete space, you know, it's like they can open the door and walk inside. And my husband comes home later than I do. And so it's always like, oh, he's home from the bookstore, you know, and so they understand that really clearly. Like they like to go to the bookstore, they like to use the zappers. And But with me, it's, you know, it's, they understand that I write books, but sometimes they forget, you know, sometimes they're like, what do you do again? You have a bookstore, you know. But this has been interesting publishing the book because they came to my launch event, Books Are Magic.
Which sounds amazing. To have your whole family there.
Well, I mean, what was amazing was that, so I mean, my children are very chatty. I don't know where they get it from. They're very chatty, and they don't really understand it when I'm talking to someone else. You know, like it takes me a long time to like walk anywhere in our neighborhood because I'm always running into someone I know because like it's.
Well, so you're a local celebrity.
Well, it's really that like I went to school where my kids go to school and the bookstore is in our neighborhood. So I know everybody. It's not like celebrity encounters. It's like she was in my 10th grade math class and like that's my kid's best friend's mom. You know, it's like that kind of thing. But so they always get really annoyed because it takes me forever to go anywhere because I'm always talking to people, which is very much like my mother who, you know, sometimes she feels left out.
Oh.
But
I'm gonna write a book for her.
oh my God, no, I don't know this yet. But when they came to the event, you know, we had been talking to them for like weeks, like you guys have to be good. You have to sit there, you have to be quiet, you have to pay attention.
And they have to sit there and be quiet for over an hour.
Yeah. And they were like, we'll see. You know? But they were great. They were great. And it was my two kids and my parents and my husband all together in the front row. And I was like, oh my God, like this is like, I don't know if that'll ever happen again, you know? And my kids behaved. They both asked a question. My older one, it was a classic. It was a classic. This is more a comment than a question. He said, do you remember when I came up to your office and you were writing this book and somebody was eating breakfast and I said, what if they were also eating an Oreo? And you said, okay. And I said, yeah, and that's in the book. And then my younger son said, at the end, you could see, he like wanted to ask a question so badly, and he like had nothing. He had nothing. But then somebody else asked a question about time capsules, which I don't know if he even like knows what that is, but I guess he understood that it's like something you put something inside. And then he was like, would you put your book in a treasure box? I said, yes. Yes.
Would you put all of your books in the treasure box?
Sure, why not? It was the big treasure box.
To sort of go back to the question of children, I kind of want to give this book to my daughter when she's old enough to be like, you're a teenager. Like, look how beautiful you are. Enjoy it. I mean, that was one of the most touching things, I think, to like remember what it felt like to be like dewy and poreless and mindless at 16. But I remember, like, I had no concept that was how I looked.
Of course not.
To appreciate it. And so the part where she goes back to being 16 and says, I'm a Renaissance painting.
Yeah.
I loved that. And I was wondering, is that just part of being a teenager? Like does anyone skip it?
No. I mean, and if they do, what kind of psychotic beasts are they? You know,
like moms of daughters all want their daughters to like skip that phase. I mean, I don't know if there's a similar phase before.
But it's still true. You know what I mean? Like it's true, you know, when you're 16 and you have no borders and you're whatever, you can jump off of something and not hurt yourself, you know. But then it's also true, I mean, you know, the older you get, you know, when you're 30 and you look at pictures from when you're 20, you're like, oh my God, I was a baby. And now, you know, that I'm 42 and I look at pictures from when I was 35 and I'm like, I was a baby. And so it's important for us to remember that we are still Renaissance paintings and that we are like as beautiful and gorgeous and young as we are ever going to be. So we should just appreciate it right now and be like, no, we look great.
I'm gonna remember that. My reason, like before and after, is like to know how little white hair I had at the beginning of the pandemic, and how much has grown since then.
Yes.
But I love the part where she is suddenly where like, oh my god, my body is incredible. Look at my skin, I can't believe it. But I also love the description of the teenager with the sunburn.
Yeah.
That was all really, really spot on. So I'm gonna ask Javier and Kristen to like see when I don't have I couldn't bring my phone up with me. So if we're getting to the audience questions time, could you just give me a signal?
Yeah.
Okay.
I have a watch.
Oh,
It's 12:46.
Okay, awesome. Well, I'm just gonna keep asking.
Yeah.
We started late, so take your time. Unless you guys have something.
Oh no, I'm just gonna keep asking something.
Yeah.
So I used to live in New York, and this book really made me want to move back, even though it's like impossible to. But I really thought that the book was kind of a love letter to New York City. And one of my college classmates who was born and raised in Brooklyn, she said at 18, she said this with a very weary 45-year-old voice. She's like, growing up in New York like ruins you for living anywhere else. And I wanted to hear what you think of this, because you were born and raised in New York, your kids are born and raised in New York.
Yeah.
What do you think are the best and worst parts of growing up there and now, like having your family there?
Yeah, I mean, I guess, you know, the best part I would say is just easy access to so many things, you know, so many, I mean, all the, you know, museums, all the beautiful places and all the less beautiful places. Like, I think that what is so wonderful about New York City is its diversity in every sense of the word, you know, that like you are so close in proximity to so many other people who are different than you are. And I think that is like one of the most valuable parts about growing up in a big city. But yeah, I mean, the thing about New York City, like about what I mean, the worst part is the same. You know, is that it's so crowded, and you're like, why can't I just have like this much room around myself? No, it's the same. But the fact that it takes a long time to do anything, like, you know, this morning I was in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, which is where my parents grew up, and I was thinking about Wisconsin, and like I went to grad school in Madison, and how easy it was to do things there, you know, like going to the DMV, things like that.
Or having laundry in the building.
Yeah, like there are so many perks to not living in New York City. But for me, like writing this book, like I wasn't thinking about like, you know, the sort of capital letters, New York City. I was really just thinking about like my hometown, which is the neighborhood that I grew up in the time that I grew up in it, which is applicable to everyone. You know, I think that like, yeah, for me, it was like, okay, so I'm walking down Broadway and that's there and that's there, and this is where I would meet my friends or whatever. But I think like my hope is that when people read it, like sure, they know New York City well, that they will be amused by all of the things that I'm throwing at them. But what I hope is that people read it and they think about their versions of it, you know, like their diners that they went to eat French fries with their friends. Because that's the heart of it.
Were there, I know the stuff that gets left out of the book is not at the top of one's mind. Were there any really special things about old New York that you wanted to include in the book that didn't make it in?
No, I mean, it really, like, if there was anything that I thought of, I just threw it right in. I'm sure there are things, like someone wrote me on Instagram today about a store, like a vintage clothing store that she had loved and that I had loved. And I was like, oh, gonna put that in. But, you know, I mean, there are
I mean, the number of possible examples of things
Right.
that change is probably also infinite.
Yeah, and I wanted to keep it like, you know, the setting as sort of tight as possible in terms of like my zone.
So the 90s nostalgia was very dear to me, especially with Jordan Catalano and the so-called life references. I remember, I think I wrote to ABC to protest the cancellation.
Oh, thank you for doing that.
I also did that for Twin Peaks when I was 11, like on a line, paper, like in child handwriting. So ABC to me was like the place that canceled all my favorite shows.
Monsters.
And they really were. But I really love the nostalgia for the pre-smartphone time. And like these days, I sometimes schedule 90s style phone calls with some of my friends in which we will talk for more than 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Do you remember, like, do you have any favorite mixtape songs like that made it onto every mixtape?
This is, I mean, it depends because I think things changed rapidly for me in those years, but as for all of us. I mean, I would say there was probably some Mariah Carey always. She was my number one love. But you know, then I went from like Mariah Carey to Liz Phair. So, you know, it was both like having fun and dancing and then also like fury. But that's the teenage girl.
What's amazing getting older is watching what each teenage girl discovered tornadoes, which is like peak teenage girl. And like regarding life before the internet, I think a lot about how my daughters experience the world, and like your son experience the world where everything happens on her phone. Like she even has been telling us, like, go buy a house on your phone. And like she thinks like that's the source of all the information. Like, so how does one capture like some of the like old joy and magic, like for the kids who have never experienced
for us in real life, you mean?
Yeah.
I don't know. I think we throw our phones in the lake. I mean, I think I think that's what we do. I mean, I don't know. Writing this book definitely made me long for that in a way that I hadn't really previously. Like I have some friends who are much better than I am at scheduling time for internet, social media stuff. But I'm not, especially like now on book tour where I'm like unmoored and floating and really only attached to the world for my phone. So yeah, I don't know. I wish I had an answer. If you have an answer, please tell me and I will do it.
No, I just wonder how I love the part where she explains that there will be something called Google. Because each morning when we're getting ready for school, we check the weather on our phones. And like there used to be a time when you listened to the radio or watched or looked at the paper. And I think that's just, it's going to be like telling her about like when dinosaurs were on the earth. Related to the internet, which is something I can talk about forever. A lot of the book is about staying present. And it's something that I really struggle with in all aspects of life. Do you have any special ways to stay present?
Writing fiction, I think, honestly. I mean, I would say I'm terrible at it in real life, with my actual body, you know? But for me, writing fiction is when I am most present and most focused. Yeah, I mean, and I think that for me, so much of this book was really about that too. I mean, it's about my dad, of course, and New York City, and wanting to get the hell out of where I was. But it's really about being recognizing the power of fiction and really appreciating that. And I think that is like that is probably like the number one thing that I learned from growing up with a writer parent, a fiction writer parent, that like, that fiction really can help you get through whatever it is, you know, whether it's writing fiction, reading fiction, or both, certainly. Yeah, I mean, I think that art is our best hope. And I always, you know, I saw my dad, I mean, you said something at the beginning about like sort of wanting to know more about, you know, your parents' lives. And I think that some of the things that I knew, some of the really hard things, the hardest things that I knew about my dad's life, certainly, was because he had used fiction to explore those things. I mean, I don't know if he would say that it helped him process those things. I mean, not more than, you know, being in psychoanalysis for 40 years, but like I saw that fiction helped, and that fiction was safe, that fiction was an okay place for the worst, scariest things. And I think that's a big reason why I was like, okay, I've got something scary.
I forgot to ask this earlier. This is like a total personal selfish question, but so this book began from a conversation. One thing that I like, I've been asked, like, what are you working on next? Yeah. Like, I haven't got this one anything. Yeah. when you're sitting down to work, do you always know like this is going to be a novel, or are you ever like, let me test out this idea of like a short story or this like a screenplay? Like at what point does it lock into being like, I'm gonna harness my life to this?
Yeah, I don't know, it's hard because it is like, it's such a big commitment. I would say, like, I have, as most writers do, I have like, what I think of as the dump, you know, like the place, the file on my computer, where if I have like a half-formed idea, I put it there, just so I don't forget it. But those, and those are usually ideas for short stories. And the last time I wrote a short story was like 10 years ago. I just don't, for me, for some reason, it's much harder to write short stories than it is to write novels. Because, you know, it's why writing poems is hard. Like the fewer words you have, the more each one counts, and it's stressful to me. But in terms of novels, like I only write novels when I really know there's enough there. But I also haven't started anything new, so who knows?
I felt much better when I one of the interviews.
Yeah, it's okay.
So before we shift to audience questions, are you allowed to talk about the TV and film adaptations you're working on?
Sure. I mean, I can talk about it as much as I want because it's all imaginary right now. Like, I mean, in theory, I'm adapting this for the screen for a feature film. Thanks. But I don't know. I mean, for every friend of mine that's like Emily Mandel, where like, you know, Station 11 gets turned into like not only a TV show, but like a really good TV show. You know, most of my friends who are writers have things optioned and then they don't get paid. So I don't know. We'll see. I'm working on it. I'm working on All Those Years as a TV show too. But I will believe it when I see it. You know.
So what do you like best about screenwriting? I mean, what's been frustrating?
Well, so what I like best about it is that you get to have collaborative conversations with people, which obviously you can't really in novel writing. What's frustrating to me and what I really like breaks my brain is all my friends who are screenwriters who get paid to write the screenplay, and then they write the screenplay, and then it doesn't get made. I'm like, how does that work? Like, I'm so used to like, oh, I wrote a book, here's a book, and then it gets published. If someone buys it, it gets published, unless it turns out you plagiarized the whole thing, you know?
Yeah. No, that does happen to my friends. It seems like you have to have a thick skin in a totally different way.
I think, you have to really, it has to really be either just for you or just for the money. One of the two.
I can't resist asking because I feel like you're gonna have a really great answer to this.
Okay.
What are you currently reading? And what are you desperate to read?
Okay, so right now I am listening to Louise Erdrich's The Sentence on audiobook, which is so wonderful.
Is she doing the audiobook?
She does it, and her voice is so calm. It's so calm. It's so calm and so slow that please don't tell Louise that I said this. I'm listening to it at like not 1.5, but like a little sped up, and it still sounds totally normal. You know? It's great. It's so wonderful. It makes me miss my bookstore. It's
And what are you desperate to read?
I can't think that far ahead. I will tell you the other book that I have in my bag that I'm also reading on tour is Less is Lost by Andrew Sean Greer, which is the follow-up to Less, his Pulitzer Prize winning novel. And that one is about travel. So it's fun. I've got bookstores and travel.
So we should open this up to audience questions.
Yeah.
Feel free to jump in, raise hands.
Yes, I'm here.
So you talk about reading time travel, watching time travel. Can you give us like 5 minutes?
Movies?
One of them, what's that? That's how it goes. Anyway,
Time for movies. Okay, I'm gonna start out with a controversial one. Keanu Reeves, The Lake House. The best. Doesn't make a lick of sense. But Keanu Reeves, it just looks beautiful. What, you don't need more than that. I mean, I personally don't need more than that. And that's Chicago. That's a Chicago time travel, starring Keanu. Peggy Sue Got Married, I rewatched at the beginning of planning this because that was the time travel movie, like aside from Back to the Future and Bill and Ted, that I watched the most as a teenager because I loved it. And it's Francis Ford Coppola. Like it's a great movie. It's got Nicolas Cage, like a young Nicolas Cage, who's like already Nicolas Cage, but no one around him knows it yet. You can't stand that.
Crossing, John Williams.
Yeah. Those are some things. Yeah.
So I'm gonna so do like in that case, and this book it's about who they are. So if you have characters inspired by real people, do they ever like react in a certain way, or like I don't know. I don't know if like you've inspired a lot of your other characters from real people. I may know, and it's like, how do you deal with that?
Yeah, I would say no. You know, there are people. I was with Lori Moore. Lori Moore was my professor at grad school in Madison, and she and I were in. She was doing a reading, and she and I were like this green room, and someone came up to her and said, "You based a character on." I don't think it was the woman herself, but it was like on my sister or whatever. And Lori was like, "What the fuck is that?" Like, what I have learned is that people will see themselves in your work whether you want them to or not, and whether you have put them there or not. I have in the past certainly plucked various traits from people. Like I am a great observer of people. It's my only hobby basically. So I won't say that I've never I don't know, thought about the way a real person sits in a chair or whatever it is. But no, I don't do it because it's a very easy way to get in trouble and have people get mad at you. But what I knew about my dad was that he wouldn't get mad. And when he read the book the first time, he was still like a little fuzzy, I would say. But when he read the book a second time, he said to me, you know, it's really personal. And I said, yeah, it is. So is there anything that you want me to change? Like, just tell me, whatever you want me to take out, I will take out. And he said, what do you think I would want you to take out? And I said, nothing. And he's like, yeah, no. But I recognize that it's extremely rare to have not just a parent, but a person in my life who not only trusts me enough to be okay with it, but also like understands how fiction works enough to be okay.
I love that you brought up your dad being a little salty at the start of the video. So when I discovered you became familiar to me, and it took me, I did a Google, and I'm like, oh, Peter's books were all over my house when I was growing up. But you're the Straub to me, that's the writer. You're the auto buy.
Oh my God, Gary, don't tell. Don't tell.
It's like that passage of time,
Yeah.
passing of the torch. So my question is, how long, if this is even there, did it take your dad to go from more salty to more sweet? Obviously, there's a lot of sweet in your relationship.
Oh yeah.
So what was that evolution?
It was really only my first novel, I think, where he was like, what is happening here? Like, he was always, I mean, my dad has always been 100% supportive of me as a person and as a writer, 100%. And he always loved the fact that I wanted to be a writer. But even so, there was like sort of a recalibration that he had to do once he realized that that it wasn't like I was going to be publishing books in some like parallel universe, you know, it was like in his universe, and that, but I think now he loves it. He loves it and is, I mean, he's like my editor's worst nightmare because he and he's always been this way, where like he'll text me and he'll be like, you should get $3 million for your next book. Like, who's giving me $3 million? Nobody. But you know, now he's like, no, we are on this train. This is a team effort. Yeah.
I was wondering what books you read like as a child or a teenager that you feel like have influenced your writing.
Yeah, I mean, all of them, you know, I mean, starting with like the Babysitter's Club, you know, I think like all writers, I read nonstop as a child, and still, I'm reading more now. What's fun about my children's ages now is that I am rereading books with them that like chapter books with them that I remembered loving as a child, like, you know, Roald Dahl, just hilarious and disgusting, and Sideways Stories from Wayside School, you know, like books that aren't like, you know, I don't mean like just the super classics, like but it's been really fun to like with them revisit things. I think when I go home, we're going to start The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, which I'm really excited about. But yeah, I read everything. And then like, you know, in my like sort of tween years, it was like the scariest, like, you know, murder books for children, you know, like Christopher Pike. I loved Christopher Pike. R.L. Stine less so, because like I also his endings were too cheesy. But like Lois Duncan, like all of those books, that's what I loved as a kid. Yeah.
We asked all of our authors, we asked this last night about this. You're hearing a third music book series based on albums, writers, critics, and favorite album, right? Not all that's important. If you could write one for any album, what for the book?
For any album.
Yeah.
I'm gonna let you go first. I feel like you probably know more music than me too.
Well, it's funny because, like, I mean, this is horrible and embarrassing, but I'm just gonna say it 'cause it's the truth. Like, I listen to so little music now, that it's really just like the Encanto soundtrack. The soundtrack, like it's just living well, like 24/7 in my house. But I believe, if my memory serves, that I am quoted in 233 1/3 books, the best volumes in the series. New Kids on the Block, Hanging Tough, because that's where my heart is. And The Magnetic Field, 16 Love Songs, because I've worked for the Magnetic Fields for a long time. So yeah, those are my two faves. I'll say that. I'm not qualified to write about any other albums other than those two. So
I don't think there's a right there.
see, I feel like it would just be about like my middle school romances, which I mean maybe. Okay, well then maybe sure.
So I would write about PJ Harvey, but I haven't. So I also barely listen to music, but actually I stopped listening to music after I moved to Brooklyn because I think it was just so overwhelming, and I never been so sonically overwhelmed by any place I lived before that. But I listened to music all the time, and then I moved to Brooklyn. I stopped listening to anything because I was just dealing with being a person in New York, and it was just so much. So I would probably write about PJ Harvey, but I feel like there's one called Stories in the City, Stories in the Sea, the one where like it's in New York and she has those big sunglasses on and a black dress. I think that's the album title. So I would write about that one.
Any other questions?
One more. Yeah.
Do you have a favorite fiction book that's set in New York City?
One of the books that I thought about a lot when, obviously there were so many, so it's hard to back them out of the way in my brain, but one of the ones that I thought about a lot while thinking about what I wanted this book to feel like was Paula Fox's book, Desperate Characters, which takes place in Wareham Hill in Brooklyn, which is sort of like right next to where I live. And what I love about it is that it's mostly people walking around at night. Like it's this couple and they're fighting, and the woman gets bit by a feral cat, which seems very relatable to me because I always want to bring home all the feral cats. But then it's really just like walking around Brooklyn at night, and that feeling of walking around New York City at night was something that I loved as a teenager. And I never do it now. I mean, like I'm 9:30 lights out kind of a person. And so reading that made me feel like, oh yeah. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you, Jess.
Thanks everyone for coming out today, and for those of you tuning in, you can go to our website, exiledbookbill.com, and purchase copies, signed copies. I'll make sure that I'll watch them. This is the year, we have copies of both books on sale back to the back table, and you guys will personalize back there. Thank you, Jasmine. Thank you, Emma.
Yay.
Thank you all, and have a good day.
Yay.